for that kind introduction. It's been fun already coming here and seeing so many friends. And it's been an honor to be invited to speak to you. I've been looking forward to this a lot. And I want to welcome all who are visitors to our beautiful city. You now know our best kept secret for Vancouver. It rains here sometimes. So we just saw that there are 3 partners that came together in partnership and diversity to create this amazing conference. And I can't help but mention 3 other partners, US, Mexico, and Canada, have just come together and signed an agreement in the early hours of this morning. So that's important for our forest industry, as well as so many other businesses and jobs and citizens' well-being. So I was thrilled with that. Even though it was raining, for me, driving here, it was like the sun had come out. So I want to acknowledge also that we are meeting on the traditional unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I want to acknowledge those of you in this urban forestry conference who are discussing bringing back perhaps a tiny bit of the incredible original forest diversity that this First Peoples city once enjoyed. Vancouver a été reconnu pour sa vallée aux arbres, les plus grandes au monde. Aujourd'hui, la quasi-totalité des attributs écologiques de ces forêts ont disparu. So imagine the tallest trees in the world standing in this valley that is now Vancouver. And now virtually all of these forest ecological attributes are gone. So the Musqueam totems that greet you coming as you arrive in the Vancouver airport are a generous greeting and a poignant reminder. The depth of appreciation that we each have for the oneness of life and for human dependency on the health of our lands and waters, that appreciation invests special meaning into acknowledging the traditional lands on which we stand and invests special meaning into the work of urban foresters, your work. Restoring bits of local original ecosystems is an enormous challenge. I was happy to hear from Catherine just how much Vancouver Parks Board is doing and continues to do. But in that context of the difficulty, it's an honor to acknowledge this community of professionals, of arborists and foresters, of green space planners and designers, policy makers, researchers, educators, who share the goal of restoring some of the forest ecosystem attributes in your urban homes and are sharing solutions with Vancouverites in our urban home of 2.5 million people. So thank you for doing this important and fascinating work and for offering your individual experiences and expertise to the others in the room. So you may ask what the Parliamentary Secretary to the President of the Treasury Board is doing at a Congress on urban forestry, but Stephen kindly just answered that. And the truth is I feel very much at home. And Cecil mentioned that there are other tree planters in the room. So have you planted trees as a tree planter out on the lands? Oh my God, look at that. So congratulations to all of you for doing that incredibly hard work and important work. So before I entered politics, I spent my career building a reforestation and urban restoration company that is closing in on 1.4 billion trees now. And I must say, I planted about 500,000 of those trees with these hands. In reforestation translated into my MBA special project on global warming, in which I calculated the role that carbon sink silviculture could play in reducing atmospheric carbon, buying time for the necessary shift to the green and clean energy economy. And I calculated the role that urban forests could play and the cost per ton of carbon abated by the program that I was proposing. That was back in 1992, when we were all just a little bit younger. But while time has passed, the amazing properties of trees have just become more evident, and so has the challenge of climate change. Since our early existence, humans have benefited from trees, have depended on trees, from fruits and nuts to coffee, and who doesn't depend on a cup of coffee in the morning? From chocolate to medicines and the occasional gin and tonic, many products we enjoy in day-to-day life come from trees. And the rigid cellulosic structure that allows trees to stretch for hundreds of feet upwards, reaching for sunlight, has provided the essential durable building materials that humans have needed for millennia. Actually, not far from here is the tallest wood building in the world, I believe, and that's University of British Columbia's new student residence. In Quebec, our government helped fund the tallest wood-constructed condominium in North America. So urban trees also clean our polluted urban air and moderate the temperature, but there are many, many more reasons urban trees improve adjacent property values by an average of 15%. 2 healthy trees can provide enough oxygen for a family of 4 and sequester 20 tons of carbon over 40 years, so that they are a vital contribution to the world's most critical issue, which I believe is tackling climate change. Trees are the architecture of forest ecosystems, and in the cities, in parks, gardens, and other natural settings, they've been shown to make people feel better, inspiring greater physical activity, making our cities more livable and sustainable, and increasing biodiversity. Urban forests reduce the noise of cities, they improve the water quality from the watersheds, their shade cools and protects our skin from harmful ultraviolet light, radiation, and our lungs from polluted air. So these values also play a very important economic function, enhancing tourism, reducing heating and air conditioning costs, lowering healthcare expenses, extending infrastructure life, including by absorbing rainfall and providing permeable surface, which is why I've been personally advocating for living infrastructure to my government, because living infrastructure provides critical measurable values and is often more effective than its built alternatives. But you know all this. Why is it so much more critical now in 2018? Because most of the world is urban. But in 2007, for the first time in history, more people worldwide lived in cities than in rural areas, and since then the trend is only accelerating. 80% of Canada's population live in towns and cities. Or as former BC Premier Mike Hark likes to say, that if you count urban, suburban, and ruburban communities, it's actually 95%. Ruburban, I think he made that one up. And so it's the rural, suburban interface small towns. And this urbanization is warming, as we know, which means that you, urban foresters, are working at the nexus of 2 of the profoundest changes in human history, urbanization and climate change. These 2 drivers make it urgent that you meet your challenge of designing and implementing healthy forested urban landscapes and cityscapes. And of course, to realize that, you need to command strong support. So you won't be surprised at me trying to unpack briefly 3 political issues. First is the problem of diffuse benefits and concentrated costs. Creating or maintaining urban forests generates widespread benefits, including across time, but the costs land on a few organizations, especially for the establishment phase. Bridging this disconnect between who benefits and who pays requires skillful government policy, regulation, or creative budgeting. So the second issue is figuring out which government is responsible. When there's shared jurisdiction, and that means municipal, regional, provincial, national, indigenous, decisions are always more complicated. So that requires critical skills in reaching out and bringing people together to work cooperatively. And the third policy issue or political issue is citizens vote. So local people must be on board. The experts might know the right thing to do, but if people don't agree with it, or they don't want sticky things landing on their cars, or they don't want to have to clean up fruit that's rotting on the lawns. So my point there is that if they're not on board, their elected representatives can't take your advice without risking their re-election. So for urban Canadians, many for whom contact with forests may be the bus stop tree or it may be the leaves that they have to rake up on their lawns, you have both a challenge and an opportunity. A challenge in that urban dwellers can feel increasingly removed from trees despite them being so vital to their lives. An opportunity because urban forests can connect them to the forests and natural environments beyond their neighborhoods and can bring a better understanding of the extraordinary contribution that trees do make to our health, our economy, and our environment. But it is encouraging. The work that you're doing is working, and I think Tree Canada really has to be singled out. Mike Rosen, Christian Wally, our chair that just spoke, what a great job that you've done in educating urban people about the importance of trees and actually bringing forward the concept of urban forestry. So thank you for that. Yeah. So there is a growing appreciation in the public of the importance of urban forests to human well-being. And on the note of well-being, I want to touch briefly into the federal government's role. Le gouvernement du Canada comprend depuis longtemps l'importance des forêts urbaines et appuie les municipalités en effectuant de la surveillance, de la recherche sur les organismes nuisibles et de la diffusion de connaissances. So the Government of Canada supports municipalities with monitoring, pest research, and knowledge exchange. Le Canada préside le groupe de travail des programmes de forêts urbaines de la Commission des forêts pour l'Amérique du Nord. Il s'affaire à élaborer une approche collaborative en matière de forêts urbaines et de santé publique avec le Service des forêts des États-Unis. So in addition to chairing the North American Forestry Commission on Urban Forest Programs working group and working with the U.S. Forest Service, Canada is also working with other countries, exchanging knowledge and identifying partnerships. Nous savons que les principaux défis, comme la lutte contre les organismes nuisibles et les maladies, nécessitent de nouveaux outils, partenariats et connaissances. These key challenges are why Natural Resources Canada, through the Canadian Forest Service, is conducting cutting-edge research and science, including in the biology and population of the dynamics of pests such as the mountain pine beetle, spruce beetle, emerald ash borer, Asian gypsy moth, white pine blister rust, and root rots. They're looking at the best ways to quarantine high-risk pests, to protect our provincial and commercial forests, and to minimize their spread through international trade. Recently, this contributed to developing triazine, one of the most effective treatments for emerald ash borer and other pests. Our government has committed significant funds for climate-resilient infrastructure, which could include urban forests. And I'll speak a bit more about that in a minute. Living infrastructure. And our forest science is supporting the Pan-Canadian framework on clean growth and climate change. Canada is also using the latest technologies to monitor changes in Canada's forests and is doing some really interesting work on forest carbon. And that research is helping us better understand the role of forests in the carbon cycle and in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But there are some exciting new developments in our federal infrastructure program that I wanted to share with you because they might actually open up some opportunities for you in terms of urban forestry. Our Prime Minister in 2015 committed to provide $180 billion in infrastructure funding over 11 years to help provinces and municipalities finance their infrastructure needs. This year, our government determined that living infrastructure will qualify. So think about that. No longer are federal dollars only available for infrastructure projects like buildings, bridges, or sewage plants. Now, groundwater recharge, urban forests, wetland restoration, and carbon-absorbing ecologies may qualify. Projects that advance climate goals and resilience, that reduce or prevent flooding and fires may qualify. So that is a big shift, and I just want you to think about how that may relate to the work you're doing. Secondly, thanks to those working towards the goal of that all infrastructure funded by Canada, the federal government, must be climate compliant and help us achieve our 2050 Paris climate targets. Now 45% of the $20 billion green envelope of that $180 billion must be dedicated to projects that support climate change mitigation. That's new this year. This new criteria will directly incentivize the use of living infrastructure in project design. And thirdly, the Infrastructure Ministry's new climate lens requires that individual federally supported infrastructure projects must conduct a life cycle assessment of embedded and operating and emitted carbon. So I predict that just by doing that counting, designers will be encouraged to include living carbon-absorbing landscapes into their projects. So I'm proud of this leadership on the part of our government. I'm very aware of the real challenges of translating these into action, and I'm very excited about the opportunities for you and others from these changes in policy. So gatherings like this are critically important. You've brought together 3 conferences: the Canadian Urban Forest Conference, the Pacific Northwest chapter of the International Society of Arboriculture Conference, and the Urban Tree Diversity Conference, all into one comprehensive congress. And again, I want to acknowledge those that have been pioneers in pushing forward the idea of urban forestry and the reality of urban forestry. It's a terrific opportunity to listen to and learn from the best, to discuss strategies and policies, research and technologies, education of voters, so they vote the right people in, people like Catherine Evans, people who understand the importance of urban forestry. In Canada, we're doing a lot to protect and improve our forests, but we're still losing net forest cover to agriculture and municipal development of a rate of 0.02% a year. That means we are losing urban forest cover. And that's why your work is so important. Nous devons accroître et entretenir les forêts urbaines. Il faut encourager les urbanistes et les politiciens à les intégrer à nos communautés. Il faut éduquer les gens, c'est-à-dire les électeurs, au sujet de leurs valeurs et les encourager à faire partie de la solution en appuyant les bonnes politiques et en plantant leurs propres arbres et jardins. So to expand and nurture urban forests, urban planners and politicians must understand why to build them into their communities, and you clearly do. People, voters, must be helped to recognize their value and be part of the solution by supporting the right policies and by planting their own trees and gardens. Over the next few days, I'll be looking at everything, you'll be looking at everything from digital urban forests to preserving biodiversity, from public gardens to managing for climate change. It's an ambitious agenda on a critical issue. À titre de député fédéral et au nom de notre gouvernement et du Premier ministre Justin Trudeau, je vous souhaite à tous un congrès des plus agréables. On behalf of our government and our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, I wish you all a very successful and enjoyable Congress. Thank you.